Among all the opinions within the medium, one that cannot be denied is that anime and manga build upon one another in many ways. Not simply in an animation sense, but different themes, certain character tropes, cliches, and ideas we all see reoccurring among different series. It's why we compare and debate, but what really engraves a certain concept in our mind comes from its execution. Among all the ideas out there, rarely do we ever see a story that puts major focus and narrative importance on weapons that go beyond a character arc. Off the top of my head, the most notorious that would fit into that category would be Soul Eater, and while we're on the mindset, Gachiakuta could also be brought into the equation. Among all the variety, the most common of weapons of course being the sword, one of anime's most iconic weapons both in choreography and raw attacks. Swordsmen have always been a character type that's hard to hate as their storylines tend to be pretty enjoyable. From Samurai Champloo to One Piece, there's a lot of them that come to mind, and yet when we talk about the idea of a huge focus on a sword's existence, I'm sure that one series that comes to mind lately is Kagurabachi. The recent big hit story focusing on the enchanted blades and our MC navigating through the underworld to protect his father's legacy from the wrong hands while delving into darker truths. No matter what avenue you go down, the enchanted blades are always at the center of conflict, and while there are plenty of other plot lines developing alongside the introduction of antagonists, I interpret Kagurabachi to be its own unique sword story. However, it isn't the first to ever do it, and after remembering I never finished it, I decided to turn the page back once more and complete 2010's Katanagatari, which literally does mean sword story upon translation. One of Studio White Fox's positively regarded works that, while being about its own deviant blades at the center of the storm, evolved to be something so much more of which one could consider a character study. Considering the show paces itself dealing with one blade per episode, the story wastes no time as each episode is an hour long. However, given it's a novel, I do understand the need. A revenge story born in the attempted falsification of history, 12 deviant blades scattered throughout the land wielded by various individuals and backgrounds, and at the center of it all lies two individuals bound by fate. Togame was introduced as our young strategist with her task to retrieve the 12 deviant blades under the shogunate's orders. Cunning and clumsy, but withholding her own hidden agenda until certain reveals, and all things considered, you can tell she was a staff favorite. Betrayed by many, she sought out one who wouldn't be tainted by tangible items, and what better person for the job than a living weapon. My mention of the falsification of history all begins with the man who created the deviant blades, Kiki Shikizaki. Being able to peer into the future, he created these blades in order to protect Japan from a foreign threat, and by doing so would falsify the history that would become had it not been for his intervention, also leading to the establishment of the current shogunate. Togame's father, on the other hand, was in opposition of this intervention and led a rebellion which ultimately failed. The so-called hero of this rebellion was known as Mutsu Yasuri, who was the head of the Kyotoryu fighting style, a bare-handed form of combat that uses no sword and yet could rival one, including the enchanted blades. Though being a hero, his family was exiled out of fear of the style one day being wielded against the shogunate. A precautionary measure, if you will, but even so, the style was still passed down to our male protagonist Shichiga, now to be the seventh head. A boy unknowing of what the world is like, and a girl knowing more of it than she would have ever liked to, connected through tragedy. Warped is the only way to describe the outcome of their agreed partnership, but what better person for the job could there be given Togame's streak of being betrayed? Oh, and I can't forget to mention that as far as what's in it for Shichiga, Togame offers him the ability to fall for her, because why not allow the guy who has never experienced romance to win big? As for the antagonistic third party, we have the Maniwa Ninja Corps, who are the exact reason why Togame has trust issues and are also in pursuit of the deviant blades as well. A clan of ninja with deep history that slowly unveils itself throughout the story, but ultimately sit in the underdog position. Everything they do is for their clan's sake, and with their sights also being on the blades, the story sets itself up as a three-way struggle. Now, from this point on, I assumed that things would be pretty action-packed even with the episode runtime, but as the story continued its point A to point B episodic format, I quickly learned that Katanagatari isn't something you are watching for the fights. There is plenty of action, and for the time period, solid stuff all things considered, but the real magic within the story is through the humanizing of Shichika. Following in his father's ways, he had no issue being wielded as a weapon while lacking in the humanity department. To quote, "There is no meaning for a sword that doesn't cut, and furthermore, there wasn't really a need for emotions to interfere. He was a living chosen weapon that fought because Togame commanded him to do so, but not even she was fully on board with that mindset. Over the course of their journey, between Togame's own teachings and the meeting of different wielders, Shichiga's humanity slowly starts to come back online. I think that out of all the episodes, 3 and 10 are my favorite, especially when understanding the messages being conveyed. Within the first 2 episodes, the killing of the blade users don't really come off as an issue, but episode 3 dealing with Meisai allowed concerns of compassion to enter the mix. Meisai's story is one of change herself, a former bandit now standing as the protector of women who were abused and thrown away by corrupt men of the era. Towards the middle of the episode, we see Meisai attempt to appeal to emotions that naturally would garner some form of sympathy. If she were to die and the sword taken, the result would only be negative for these girls who were under protection of the sword. However, none of this would move Shichika's stance an inch. Whatever needed to be done will be done as ordered by Togame, as the thought of defeating his enemy without taking their life, if possible, was the last thing that crossed his mind. Togame's command was the equivalent of absolute rule, and in that, Meisai met an unfortunate end. Even Togame was hesitant to dish out a job well done at first, but this whole episode sets up the change that would occur down the line. Just because it was ordered doesn't mean that Shichika's humanity should be disregarded either. It became important for him to consider his own actions as well, given that life is a precious thing. This development of Shichika becoming more than just a sword extends itself to the more quieter moments as well, whether it be jealousy, teasing, being desired, and then eventually outright acknowledging the importance of his own free will. His character was being built up episode by episode. In real time, we saw what became of the autonomy of a weapon. Every encounter contributed, and come episode 10, it was time to weigh this development upon a scale. As called out by the saint who was the antagonist of this episode, the feelings that Shichika harbored were not that of love. Which, to be fair, is a pretty reasonable deduction, as falling for Togame in question is quite the offer for somebody who's lived on an island his entire life. What really needed to be established beyond his own free will was his resolve. The reason he fights for her stemming from a combination of his own free will but also sympathy. Without him, she could never get this far. Plus, his dad is the reason why she doesn't have one, and without her, he would never fight at all. There is a mutual need for one another, and realizing that paints a clear picture for why some people must be cut down. For the sake of their aspirations, they had to steel their resolve, even if it meant facing things that they don't want to. Of course, this episode in particular also served great purpose for Togame as well. Though it was a bit obvious even before now, her true goal is to enact revenge against the shogunate given how the rebellion ended, and while the swords are necessary as a means to an end, her being trapped on this path would end up being her own undoing. Her inability to forget about her true objective and look forward to life beyond it gave her rival the means to gain the permanent one up on her, as Princess Hite's own sword and final deviant blade wielder would be the one person Shichiga could not protect her from. Even through history, you reap what you sow. The conclusion of this story is definitely something that would be considered controversial had it came out today, with Togame's death left Shichika off the leash, barging into the shogunate's castle and taking out literally everyone for the exception of Princess Hite. The most important thing, however, is that he decided to do this on his own free will. He was prepared to die as human. In the end, everything could be interpreted as pointless, but that in itself has a point. The swords that were supposed to be gathered were broken. Togame died before exacting her revenge and living to see it. Kiki's attempt to falsify history in the end had failed, and the Maniwa corpse ultimately perished. If I were to have a complaint about the show, it would definitely be about them, as they had some of the more interesting characters in both design and background, but ultimately they were just killed off one by one. Though to be fair, I think there are a lot of things the show could have done better, especially with certain reveals, but I'm like 14 years too late with these complaints. Especially the fact that Hite ends up joining Shichika on his travels, because I guess they're kinda just cool now? Surely I'm not the only one who thinks that this was a little crazy. In the end, this story is all about the journey and not the destination, because the final destination is ultimately a personal one. Nothing was accomplished by those involved, and while it may seem pointless, Shichika was able to press on as a human. His existence did not need to be bound to Kyotoryu at the end, and he came to this conclusion on his own. So while nobody's aspirations came to light, the personal growth made the story digestible, and while it certainly was a very different way to get the point across, I did enjoy myself. In some ways, I can see a page being taken out of this story's book and used in Kagurabachi towards the end. Unlike Togame, Chihiro may end up breaking free from this path of revenge. The truths he may learn in pursuit of his father's killers might alter his perspective altogether. We already saw a glimpse of this in Arc 1, and for all we know, years down the line, all the enchanted blades will end up broken, and their destruction could represent the shackles on his life being broken, and eventually he too will be able to move on. The person who wields the sword and the choices that they make is what's gonna matter at the end of the day. It'll be the points that really stick down the line and allow people to revisit. Sword stories may have a knack about being more about character, and seeing how one story approached it, Kagurabachi's future has plenty of time and room to go above and beyond with the idea. Of course, there's a high possibility I'll be dead wrong and it'll do something even more unexpected, but from one story to another, it'll all be about the execution rather than the idea itself. I definitely didn't cover this story in full detail, as the video would be 5 times longer, so by all means, give the full anime a shot if you've got time. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, will bring me to the end of this video. As always, thank you for watching, and make sure to leave all your thoughts in the comments section down below. Stay safe out there until we meet again in the next video.